Hey everyone, Mark from Soundby here again, and for today's quick and dirty tip, we are going to be expanding upon our drum making setup here. Now, in a previous video, we did talk about minimalistic mic setups for drums, like the recorder man technique, which is fantastic if you're limited to only 4 channels to record a whole drum set with. Today we're going to explore what happens when you have a little bit more flexibility up to 8 channels. Really, this lends you the opportunity to get more creative with your drum sound. It offers up the ability for more textures and just a wider, greater stereo image with some more 3D feeling with a drum kit. So I'm going to dive into the mic choice and the placement that we chose for today's session, but keep in mind there are a lot of variables and a lot of different options you can substitute or rearrange for yourself. For today's session, we chose a kick drum mic placed inside the kick drum, a top and a bottom snare, a close mic on both the rack tom, the floor tom, stereo overheads in a spaced pair array this time, we'll get into that a little bit later, and a mono room mic. Now depending on your genre, your production, your drummer's playing style, there are a few things you could rearrange. For instance, you could swap out a close mic for another mic on the kick. It is very common to have an inside kick and an outside kick. Or I've also seen some folks who just ditch the bottom snare altogether. All that aside, the biggest consideration here is the placement of your overheads in this setup. So in our minimalist miking setup, we focused on the recorder man just because it was very consistent, repeatable, and really covered a lot of ground. Since we have the ability to supplement our drum sound with a lot more channels of close mics, we are instead going for the spaced pair setup here, with allows us to do a much wider pan and really cover the full 3D spectrum, giving us a bigger 3D image, a wider stereo spread, and just kind of a bigger drum sound in general. And there are a lot of factors at play in this here. I know when we were originally setting this up, we focused on how close the overhead should be, how higher up they should be, whether they should be straight down or whether they should be kind of both pointing at the center of the snare. With the overheads up higher, the drum sound kind of gets a little bit more open. The transients become a little bit more undefined and things just kind of loosen up a little bit. As we begin to bring these closer, the sounds just kind of begin to really tighten up. Like the snare was the most prominent example of this. The closer we got, the punchier it was, and just a little more dynamics were in play. When we tried the spaced pair array with more of a crossover, we found that we were getting too much snare and not enough stereo spread. So we ultimately settled on a straight down arrangement, a little bit closer to the kit, and we measured it from the center of the snare. Now there are folks who say you can measure it from the center of the kick. That is fine as well, but we find that the bass drum with predominantly low-end frequencies tend to be less directional, so it's not as important in our opinion to get that centered with the overheads. So we just take a mic cable, like I mentioned before, or a piece of string, or even a pair of sticks, and measure that distance from the snare to our first overhead, and then on the spectrum, keeping it equidistant for the second overhead array there. And then, like I mentioned before, we hard pan those left and right, zoom in, check, make sure they are in phase with each other, and then when your drummer does fills, you just get this really expansive, explosive sound. So the last element in our multi-mic drum setup is our room mic. Now in my opinion, this is the most kind of fun, creative, and experimental part of the multi-mic drum setup here, just because you have a lot of control. There really are no hard and fast rules to where you position the room mic. This is kind of one of those things that is a lot of trial and error, and just kind of place it to where it sounds best. We used a large diaphragm condenser that was actually voiced a bit brighter than we would have liked. So to kind of supplement that, we lowered it down and a little bit of an angle to kind of offset some of the cymbal sizzle here and get a little more body from the kit. But like I said, you can really use any mic you have and just kind of experiment and use your polar pattern to its advantage to kind of play how much room dynamics you want. So this can help if your room is very good and very well acoustically treated, like our live room here, or maybe you're in just kind of a random garage or spare bedroom that really doesn't have a lot of treatment. You can use the room mic to your advantage and kind of play off that sound as well. And we'll jump into control room here and kind of go more into that, but let's get back to another clip of Paul's playing. These tracks are completely dry, no EQ, no compression, no processing whatsoever. So we'll play a clip and then we'll dive a little more into it in the control room. So jumping back to the control room here, we can look into how having a few extra channels and a few extra mics for a drum setup, as well as using a different overhead setup like the spaced pair array, gives us more flexibility and options when it comes time to mix. Again, one of the benefits of using spaced pair overheads is really the ability just to really space it out, no pun intended, and get that wide stereo image. So the first thing I would do is take my overheads and I'm going to immediately hard pan them left and right. And what that does is just kind of really allow fills to really full up the stereo field. And then you can take other channels, like for example, how we mic'd the top and the bottom snare. We now have the ability to kind of use those microphones as a form of EQ, which is something that we've talked about in previous videos. So when I'm using these drums in context with the mix, let's say I would start with the snare bottom fader totally played down, and then as we are playing through the track, if I really want that snare to have a little bit more thwack, a little bit more of that crack, that's where I would use the bottom snare mic as a kind of a little bit of an EQ to brighten it up a little bit and kind of really add that push of the snare. The room mic is another example of this. If we really want to add some space and just some kind of looseness to the drum sound, playing with the fader and automating it up and down can really add some life and breath into the drum sound. One of my favorite production tricks is leaving the room mic out for a verse, and then as the tension builds when the chorus comes in, pushing the room mic all the way up and really letting just the sound of the room really ring out and get that dramatic effect. This is something that we really couldn't do easily with the 4-mic or minimalistic setup. So while there are trade-offs, like we mentioned, measuring for phase and making sure that the rack tom, the floor tom, top snare, bottom snare, kick, that those are all as tightly phase coherent as possible, that does become more of a challenge, but the reward is, like I said, just a more creative payoff, depending on your mix and production. So measuring from the snare, we can see as we zoom in a little bit, we did get these as tight as possible. Again, do not be afraid of the polarity switch on your preamp, on your channel strip in a DAW, or what have you. A really simple way to go through this is do a test recording, and then if there's any channels you're in question about, just flip that polarity switch, and if it gets thinner or fatter, that's going to be the one you're going to want to choose. Typically, when the sound sounds larger and fuller, that's going to be the closest phase coherence, and that's typically the one that you want to gravitate towards, but also that can work to your advantage. That can also be a form of EQ and processing. So there are a lot of ways to go about this. I would definitely recommend downloading the high-res files for yourself. There is no processing on these tracks whatsoever. No EQ, no compression. So take the time, put it up in your DAW, process it how you would on your own music, and just see how using more mics versus fewer mics and using spaced pair as opposed to Recorder Man or XY can really alter your drum sound for the better. As always, thanks for checking out this video. We would love to go more into detail about this if you have any questions, so definitely shoot us an email at proaudio@soundpure.com. We can shoot you over those high-res files, or give me a call anytime. Always happy to talk about any of the concepts discussed in this video, any of the mics used as well. We do have a try before you buy, so I can definitely send them out for you to hear for yourself on your own setup in your own room, and just see what kind of mic placements work for you. Hope to talk to you soon, and we'll see you next time.